My new book is called Don't Fail Me Now, and I read a book as a young girl called Homecoming by Cynthia Voigt, and it was about a bunch of siblings who got kind of left in a car and had to find their way home. And it just always stayed with me. So I guess that was sort of the germ for the novel, which is about a group of siblings led by a 17-year-old sister whose parents both, for various reasons, have kind of let them down and aren't in the picture. And they find themselves really needing to figure out how to move on and how to rebuild their family together, and they end up taking a cross-country road trip from Baltimore to California.
What's something that you think is a must-have for a cross-country road trip or any kind of road trip?
Ooh, music, definitely. I think the music is key. Actually, in my book, the car they're driving in is like a real old, broken down car from like the 70s, so they don't have a CD player or anything, so they have to rely on the radio. But I think mixtapes, even, radio can be good, but you have to have the right music. Totally. I think as a city girl and an East Coast person, I've always longed to have a trip across the country through all of the, states that I've never seen. So I'm hoping to do that.
What would be on your playlist if you were going on a road trip?
Okay, so my musical tastes are pretty specific to the time that I kind of came of age as a teenager, which is the early 90s. So I would say probably a lot of like early 90s hip hop and pop would be on my list. I'm more tend toward that side of the musical spectrum than anything like truly cool today.
Whenever you do sit down and write, is it usually like you sit down and write for a long period of time, or just in spats as it comes to you?
I'm in the position where I've actually never written a novel not having a small child. So I wrote my first novel when my son was a baby, and now he's 4. So I always have to write in fairly short spurts, like about 6 hours is the longest of a chunk that I'll ever get. So I've learned to just try to turn it on and off, to turn the creative mind on and off, which is hard. Sometimes it really doesn't want to.
Do you ever do like on your phone, like a voice memo if you can't write down?
Yes, I'll walk around with my phone, like kind of pretending to be on a phone call, narrating a scene, dialogue and stuff. Yeah, that happens.
If someone hasn't read any of your books before, what can you tell us about all of them, how they're similar, how they're different?
My first book is called 5 Summers, and that's about female friendship, a bunch of friends at summer camp. My second book is called Like No Other, and that's actually very different. It's about kind of a star-crossed romance between 2 teenagers in Brooklyn that have very different communities and religious beliefs. And then my third, Don't Fail Me Now, is about a family kind of trying to rebuild. So they're very different, but I will say that looking back on them, I didn't plan this, but the common thread is sort of forging the most important relationships in your life and trying to figure out as a teenager who you are, versus what your family and community, has kind of made you into or wants you to be. So it's a lot about identity and finding the people who are going to be able to help you be who you want to be.
Do you think that's just a topic that you're really interested in, or does it come from your own personal experience?
I guess it must come from my own personal experience. I mean, I think that to me that just seems at the center of being a teenager, just figuring out how to be independent and how to be your own person and how to sort of, bridge that gap between child and adult.
What was the hardest part for you growing up as a teen?
I had an enormous unibrow, which is not, I want to be clear, like the deepest depths of suffering, but it felt that way at the time. And since my name is Una also, like it was Una, unibrowed, I just felt very awkward and kind of physically insecure, and I just remember that feeling of trying to figure out, I really felt like I was trying to come out of a shell, both, emotionally and physically, and trying to figure out like how to do that with as much grace as one can muster when you're a 13-year-old with a giant unibrow.
What would you say to someone who might be struggling with either exactly the same or something similar, or just feeling a little insecure?
Oh man, I don't know. I just think that, adolescence and teenagehood, it's not the best that it gets. It gets way better. And I think that, if you can just make it through those awkward, painful high school years when everything, even if it's a very small thing, feels like an enormous struggle, if you can just hold on through that, life gets so much better.
Do you have any sneak peeks of what's coming or things that you're working on?
Yeah, so I actually just finished a first draft of another young adult novel, which is set at a performing arts high school in New York. So it's just, it's different from all my other ones. It's 5 different characters telling a story.